Hi, I'm Caia, and today I have Kevin J Briggs. He's the author, and he specializes in consciousness and the connection to ETs and UFOs. Thank you for being here, Kevin.
Thank you, Caia. Thank you for inviting me on your podcast.
Yes.
Without people like yourself, I couldn't get my message out there. So thank you very much.
I know that you've been having really interesting stuff in your life since you're a child, and I'd like you to share some of the stories today here. And I'd like to ask some questions at the very end, if you don't mind.
Okay, that's fine. Yes, well,
Okay.
whatever you're interested in. I can probably start from the beginning,
Yes.
Caia.
Yes.
It started when I'm now 69, and it started when I was 3 years old. My mother had engaged a photographer to come and take some photographs for the family album. And the photographer arrived, and I was lifted up onto a oak dining room table. And from that elevated position, I realized that my conscious energy, my spiritual energy, was in a physical body again. And that was the first recollection of the beginning of my journey. But I always felt that I was looking out from the body. I was like a symbiosis. It was the physical body and then the spirituality, the consciousness itself that was inside that physical body. So that was the beginning of it. Then nothing happened, just a normal childhood. I was always very sensitive to vibrational frequencies that around us all the time as a child. When I got to 8 years old, I was taking a bath at home, and I felt that change in the frequency within the bathroom. And I looked to my right, and two beings appeared. They were both very attractive, one male, one female. They were human in appearance. Both had long blonde, shoulder-length hair, deep blue eyes, and they were wearing a deep blue jumpsuit type garment. And I was terrified by this, as you can imagine, being an 8-year-old. And they were speaking telepathically to one another, which I could understand. I now know these two beings. I've met them all my life. They've guided me and taught me about consciousness and the different levels of consciousness. I know that Dee, she's the female. She questioned Ort, that is the male, and asked him, is this the boy? And he said, yes, this is the boy. And then she questioned him again and said, are you sure this is the boy? She said, look at him, he's small, he's uneducated, and he's frightened by our presence. And as I said, I was terrified. Ort replied, yes, this is the boy, I will guide him, I will teach him. There was some other information passed between the two of them, the conversation, and I don't fully remember all of that. And then they disappeared, they just left. And as I say, I was so frightened, I didn't get out of the bath, the water went cold. My mother came in to see why I was still in the bath. I told her about the two beings, and she said it was just my imagination. Clearly it wasn't. I've been in contact with them all my life. They've introduced me to others, and they do tell me I'm part of their extended family. Only I am in the third dimension, and they come from the fifth dimension and are originally from Andromeda. So we don't think about consciousness having these levels, but clearly they do. And the difference between the different levels, the different dimensions, are just the frequencies that they exist at. So I understand all this now because they've taught it to me over the years. And they've taught me not by sitting me down in a classroom, but giving me experiences, shared experiences sometimes with them to help educate me in relation to who we really are, what the true life form in the universe is, and within our galaxy, the different life forms that are here. So that was the beginning of the journey. And then 9 years old, I'd had some friends around. It was a Sunday, I remember the day specifically. We'd been playing during the day, and it was time for them to go home for tea. And I showed them out the back door. And as I turned around into the home, I felt this frequency again, this higher frequency. So I went looking for this frequency. I went upstairs in the bedrooms, back down in the kitchen, into the living room again, where the vibrational frequencies seemed strongest. I was drawn towards the window and I looked behind the curtains, the drapes, and there was an orange orb there, about 4 to 6 inches across. It was slightly vibrating, orangey yellow in colour. There was no communication, and I woke up the following morning and I knew instinctively it was still there because I could feel the vibrational frequency. I went down and looked behind the curtain and it was still there. It stayed until Friday, but when I opened the door, the back door, on the Friday afternoon coming home from school, I knew that the orb had left because I couldn't feel that frequency. But what happened with the orb, I was, they must have activated something in my DNA, because from that point on, my psychic abilities were enhanced, no end, and then I was able to separate my own consciousness from my physical body and go and travel at will wherever I wanted to go. As a young child, I didn't go very far. I would just usually go and visit my grandparents on a Sunday. Usually my grandmother would be in the kitchen cooking on a Sunday, and my grandfather would either be reading the newspaper or watching the TV. And I would sit upstairs in their master bedroom. They had a closet there, large closet, walk-in closet, and I would sit there looking down through the floor, which was opaque, and it gave me great comfort to see them. And that's as far as I travelled as a young child. I didn't realise the full potential until I got a little bit older and was educated more in relation to consciousness and the different levels of consciousness. And then probably the next event I would be I was 14 years old. I had a paper out, quite common for young children where I lived at that time. And every time I left the home to go to the paper store to collect the papers, a UFO would appear directly above my home. And then as I walked towards the store, a second UFO would come and they would follow me around the paper route. And when this happened, I was always aware that there was some being or someone else behind a fence, behind a hedge. I could feel that vibrational frequency. So on one occasion, I plucked up the courage and asked these beings to show themselves. Mm-hmm. And 2 small grey beings stepped out from behind the hedge. I wasn't frightened. I asked what they wanted, and they said there was a group of people that wanted to meet with me. And I said, well, I can't go with you. I've got my paper round to finish, and then I've got to go to school. And they said, well, you can finish your paper round. I nearly finished it anyway, and then we'll have you back in time for school. So I agreed to go with them. I went with them, and I was taken to a very large craft. And I think it's a mothership where they flew the small craft into this hangar. And it was huge, absolutely huge. All the different sizes of craft that we see, that people take photographs of and things. And from there, I was led down to an amphitheatre. Went down this long corridor into an amphitheatre, and the amphitheatre was full, all different beings. And on the front of the amphitheatre, on the stage, was a table, and there were 8 beings sat at that table. And the first 2 were Ort and Dee, the 2 human-looking beings that I'd seen in my bathroom when I was 8. So now this is 6 years later. So I recognised those 2. And then next there was a blue bird type being. Her name was Anna. And then a small grey. His name was Zar. I've come to know him over the years. He's a mathematician. He's an engineer. He comes from the Pleiades system, he tells me. He has 3 offsprings. He calls them offsprings, not children. He has a sense of humour as well. On one occasion, I was speaking with him, and I cracked a joke, and he laughed. But what was interesting, when he laughed, I felt the emotion of the laughter as well. So that was the first time although I've got great contact with them, the actual feeling of their emotions when they have them. And very often, people don't realise that they are very similar to us, or Zark is anyway, because he has a sense of humour, he has emotions, he has a family. And then after that will be Ra. He had very powerful energy with him. He tells me he's Anunnaki. He tells me he's very old. He tells me he's a 9th dimensional being. And he incarnates at will. He moves from the ninth dimensional frequencies down into the lower dimensions if he wants to incarnate. And then next to him was Targ. He was a tall grey, and he told me that he was responsible not only for the security of this group, this Council of Eight, as I've come to know them, but for the security of this quadrant of the galaxy. And I never thought about the galaxy being separated into quadrants. And then after that was Chica. I was a little bit perturbed when I saw Chica. He's a large mantis being. In fact, he just looks like we have these small grasshoppers where I live in Florida, and the little mantis insects as well. He looked just like that, but he was 6 feet tall. So I was a bit perturbed by him. But and then the last one was Orla. She's a tall white, very pale complexion, and her hair was translucent, shoulder length. And she informed me she was an astrobiologist, I believe. So that was the group of 8. That was a council meeting, like we would have in our parliaments. We would have in our Congress over here in the US, where all the delegates gather, and the main delegates are at the front on the stage. And that's what really the event was. And I was there to be introduced to them. And so obviously I know them all. I've had contact with all of them all my life. The main contact has been Orton D. And Orton D describe themselves as guides and teachers. And that's exactly what they've done. They've guided me and taught me in relation to consciousness itself. So a little bit later, I was 17, 18, and I was trying to find others that had contact with higher conscious beings, extraterrestrials, whatever you want to call them, or people that traveled outside of the physical body who were able to separate their conscious energy from the physical body. And I was unable to find anybody that had any information on it. So I decided one evening to ask Ort. I remember going to bed that evening and I said to him, look, I know there's a lot more information out here. I can't find anything. My family, my friends don't know anything about this. Can you come and show me some more, give me some more education? He came, he took hold of my hand, and I left my body. Not unusual for me, but leaving my body with someone else. I looked down, I could see my body was fast asleep, and we went out through the window. The window was closed, we went through the glass, and we just flew around the subdivision. Again, nothing unusual for me, except I was doing it with Art. We came back in through the glass, and I could see my body asleep. I went back into my body, and then I woke up the following morning, and I wasn't certain whether I was dreaming. I wasn't certain what it was. So I thought the following evening, I will do the same again. So I relaxed, I fell asleep, I held out my hand and asked Ort to come and show me some more. He came, he took hold of my hand, I left my body, I looked down, I could see it was fast asleep, and we went out through the window again. And then we went a bit further this time. We went down into the Leeds City town centre where I lived at the time and worked. We flew over the hospital, the university, the town hall, the buildings that I recognised, and all the people milling about. And then we came back to my apartment through the window, and I could see myself asleep, and I went back into my body. I woke up the following morning, and I still wasn't convinced. I wasn't either sleepwalking or dreaming. So I thought I'll do this for the third night. So I did the same procedure, and only I changed slightly this time because I was concerned about going out the window because my apartment was 3 stories up and it was concrete pavement below. So when Ort came, he took hold of my hand. I looked at my body and I said to him, do you mind if we go out through the roof this time? Because I'm still not convinced I'm not sleepwalking or dreaming. We went out through the roof. And then on one occasion, he came to me and he said, Kevin, I'm going to take you somewhere special tonight. Are you prepared to go with me? And I said, yes, I was. And again, he took hold of my hand. I left my body. We went out through the roof. And on this occasion, we went up and up and up. And I could see the earth getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And we went into a higher dimension. And within that dimension, there were 15 people stood in a line. At the head of the line was my deceased father. And he was stood up, he was 6 feet tall. And I had never seen him standing because when I was born, he was in a wheelchair. So I'd never seen him stood up and walking. There was a beaming smile on his face. And the love that emanated from this group of people was just tremendous. And he said, he welcomed me. And he said, Kevin, I'm going to introduce you to your family members going back over 300 years. So we set off down the line. I was introduced to them. They showed me their last incarnation in the physical. And then when we got halfway down the line, instead of having a physical, they were a pure conscious energy orb, orange, yellow in color, slightly vibrating. But they were still able to show me telepathically their last incarnation. And I went all the way down the line. I was introduced to all 30 and then came back. And then Art said, right, it's time to go. So we left. They wanted me to stay with them. And I said, no, I can't stay. I've got things to do down there in this the third dimensional world, and I'm enjoying the physical. So I left. We went back to my apartment. I could see my body asleep. I went back into my body, and then I woke up the following morning. And then from then on, I used to go and visit that group for quite a period of time. And I got so confident in traveling outside of my body at will to those higher levels of consciousness to meet with my deceased family that I would do it on my own. I didn't need Art's help with that anymore. And I did that for over a period of 2 years. And then I was finding it more and more difficult to get back into my body. So I thought one day when I was at work, I thought I'll go back and see them this evening and let them know that I won't be coming again for the reasons I've explained. And I went up to see them. Again, that feeling of love just emanated from the whole group. They were so pleased to see me again, and they wanted me to stay with them. And I had to explain that I was already enjoying my physical and I had things I wanted to do. And so I told them that I wouldn't be back, and I haven't been back since. But I know they're still there at those higher levels of consciousness. And they may not have a physical, but they are still alive as pure conscious beings, really, conscious energy, which we all are. But we have this outward appearance of the physical. Ra came to me one day. I was in my early 30s, and what happened with him? I was a police officer in the UK for a number of years, and very often we'd have to do like the 2 shifts, what we call a quick changeover shift. And I was very tired when I did those 2 shifts. I would come home at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and go to bed for a couple of hours until my wife came home at 5 o'clock. And on this occasion, I got into bed and a shadow being appeared. I've seen shadow beings all my life. And this one looked straight at me. And I told him to go away. I said, I was tired, come back later. He left. He came back again. And then he beckoned me again. And I told him to, I'm tired, come back later. He left. And he came back a 3rd time. So I said to him, look, you've gone through all this trouble. What you obviously want to show me something. So I got up out of bed. I didn't get dressed. He went through the door. I opened the door and went onto the landing. And there was this beam of light there. The beam of light was from the floor to the ceiling. I'll step into the beam of light. If you've ever seen the TV movies Star Trek, where they transport down to the planets with a beam of light that takes them from the craft down to the planet. This beam of light was just like that. So I stepped in it and I felt immediate euphoria, total euphoria. And then a voice spoke to me and it was Ra. And he said, I am your father, you are your father's son. I didn't really understand what he meant by that at the time. I think I do now. And then the beam disappeared and from the ceiling and the floor sequentially and disappeared in my chest, abdomen area. And I was left feeling euphoric. I was no longer tired. I got dressed. And when my wife came home, I told her about the event. And we actually went out for a meal that evening, which I would never do on one of those quick changeover shifts because I was always too tired. So that would be, that was my early 30s. And I say my my contact continues to this day. They've asked me to do various things. They wanted to meet with our government's representatives. I have contacted the United Nations in relation to that. And I've got quite an interesting story in relation to that. I was asked to contact our United Nations and see if there was a mandated protocol implemented to receive our ET star family's ambassadors. I contacted the office of Nicholas Hedman. He was the chairman of the Outer Space Affairs Committee at that time. I did receive a reply by email, and he said there wasn't a mandated protocol implemented should advanced extraterrestrials wish to communicate with the United Nations. So I asked him, how would we implement a mandated protocol? Not being a politician or anything like that, I don't know the protocols for these things. So he replied again and said we would have to get a member state to make that proposal, and then it could be voted upon. And then they asked me again, they gave me a specific time and date. I remember the date, it was February the 1st, I think it was 2019. They wanted to meet with our United Nations representatives in New York. So I contacted Nicholas Hedman, or his office, and explained that the extraterrestrials that I have contact with would like to meet with the United Nations in New York on February the 1st. I didn't receive a reply to that email, but I'm not surprised. But I did receive a response from the automated email to say that they had received it. At that time, I also contacted the office of Dr. DiPippo in Washington, D.C., where the UN have an office there. I didn't receive a reply from him either, but I wasn't surprised because it's quite a leap from someone who they don't know, says he's got contact with extraterrestrials, and the extraterrestrials are wanted to meet with the United Nations. So, but what was very interesting about that, 8 days later, after I'd contacted them, I sent the emails, a friend of mine, Terry Lovelace, he's a lifelong experiencer like myself. He's a retired law professor. He's a retired assistant district attorney. So he's used to working with government. And he phoned me up and he said, Kevin, because I put all the information out there on the internet, on Facebook and everything. And he said, Kevin, I've been given the exact same information that you've been given. And Terry said to me, Kevin, I know Dr. DiPippo in Washington. I will contact him and send him an email, and I will support what you are saying and requesting, which he did. I have copies of all the emails. He didn't receive a reply either. So Terry went through the back channels of government, which he had when he was working as a district attorney, assistant district attorney. And in his words, he got the pushback. So they didn't want to know at this particular time. I know our governments know that our extraterrestrial families are here. They're engaging the planet. They're engaging individuals like myself. And I've been speaking out now for 5 years. And the only reason I'm speaking out is because 5 years ago, I got up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom. As I got back into bed, a bright light came on the outside of the bedroom window. It came in through the bedroom window and lit up the bedroom like a myriad of butterflies. But it was just pure white light. And then Orton D materialized at the bottom of the bed. And bearing in mind, I'm used to seeing them all my life, so nothing unusual for me. And after pleasantries, I asked what was the reason for their visit. And they said, Kevin, we want you to talk about your lifelong contact with us. We want you to write about your lifelong contact with us. And I remember saying to Ort, I said, I don't mind talking about it, but I'm not a writer. And Ort replied, well, Kevin, we will continue to guide you. We will continue to teach you. And we will give you information to include in your books. And which they did. And he said, Kevin, you will write 2 books. I've written the first book, which is Spiritual Consciousness, A Personal Journey, which outlines some of the events I've spoken today. And then the second book, I have finished it now. I've just got to edit it, and then I'll get that one published as well. So I'm really in a position now where I've done what they've asked me to do, except for one other thing just recently. They asked me if I would write a mandated protocol. So I've written one. It's only 2 short paragraphs, but it includes what they've requested in this mandated protocol to receive them. So I wrote it down, with their requests included, with my wife signed it and whipped it, and then a friend of mine, Kathleen Marden, Denise Stoner, and Dr. Melanie Barton, they signed and ratified. So now we have the citizens of Earth have their own mandated protocol, and we can make the request to our ET star families if we get a group of experiencers like myself together, and then we can make that request. So really, it's been a journey leading up to that, and how conscious energy can be used for communication, for travel, for healing, for education, for creation and co-creation. And once we realize that as a species, then we will evolve to a higher level of consciousness ourselves. And we are evolving at that to that stage now. And I've been educated in all the modalities that they use, that the 5th dimensional beings use, and using consciousness itself, the conscious energy, as the conduit for all these modalities. And that's where we need to be as a species so we can evolve. So I think it's exciting times, and I believe now that we can, with all this information, and it's not just myself, I know there are others that are lobbying the United Nations. I'm aware of a group of leading scientists from China, from Russia, from Europe, who had a conference in Moscow, paid by the Chinese, believe it or not. They paid all the expenses of the delegates, the hotels, the air flights, and I know that I knew one of the delegates that was invited. And the outcome of that 3-day conference in Moscow was to lobby the United Nations for a mandated protocol to receive the star families. And then I'm aware of Stephen Bassett in Washington, D.C. He's been lobbying for quite a long time for a mandated protocol. Then I'm really a messenger as well, I suppose, an intermediary between our star families and now the citizens of Earth, as it were. And I've been told by my ET star families that the request for the reveal globally of our ET star families' presence will come from the citizens of Earth. I haven't been given any dates. We've gone through that route, and obviously if our governments want to get involved, they can do. I'm sure they have their own contacts anyway. And I know someone that was asked to speak at the Brazilian Senate a couple of years ago in relation to the ET star families. So there are many people who are working towards this, many groups. And I say I'm not important, I'm just one individual. But because of my education in relation to all the modalities and understanding of consciousness, I'm more like an intermediary, shall we say.
Disclosure is happening everywhere around the world, and then it's pretty rapid speed. And there are so many different groups of people talking this and that. What's your thought on that?
Yes, I think it's all positive. All my interaction has been positive with them, and that there are different species, this Council of 8 that I've had interaction with. I know there are some negative ETs out there, as there are negative humans. So, but we have to be aware of that, and we have to deal with them diplomatically as we deal here on Earth with our different cultures that we have. And we have our ambassadors here who mingle with their ambassadors from the different countries. So really, we just need to extend that now out to our ET star families. And like you say, they've always been here. It's just that they don't allow us to see them. And because they have technologies, they're able to hide from us. And because they are at a higher vibrational frequency, we don't see them anywhere. I'm able to pick up on them when they're here, and they have shown themselves to me. So I know that they're here. And I think the disclosure is happening within the UFO communities, the conscious communities, some of the academic communities now. and now talking about the ETs. In fact, a friend of mine, Ray Hernandez, he's just published a 4-volume book, A Greater Reality.
But your case is like they turn up, right? And then they teach you what you need to know. And while it's happening, you're seeing them as 3D, or is that in a thoughts form, like in your mind?
Okay. I have met them in the 3D when they were in the bathroom. That was they were there in the physical. I met all 8 in the physical when I was 14, when I was taken to the craft. I've met Alt and D in the physical down here. I'm also able to see them when I speak. I'll communicate with them telepathically, which is using consciousness as a conduit, because consciousness is just energy. But if I relax, open my mind and speak to them telepathically, then I also get a visual, but the visual is an internal visual. As I spoke about Zark when I cracked the joke, I was speaking to him telepathically, but I could see his face. And then when he spoke to me and when he smiled and laughed, I felt that. And I had a craft appear outside our home. And I was actually in my bedroom and I was trying to communicate with this Council of 8, and I was unsuccessful. But I communicated with a small craft that was flying past, and it had about 6 or 7 small greys in it. I knew the pilot, his name was Tia, and I asked him what he was doing here. And he said, we were close by, we've deviated from our flight path, we wanted to come and see you where you live. As I'm speaking to them telepathically, I can see them in the craft, but obviously my eyes are shut. I'm using conscious energy as the conduit to see them. But what was interesting about that particular communication, my wife was sat outside on the pool deck having a cup of tea, it was early morning, and a big rainbow appeared, which is 180 degrees from fence line to fence line. I have 5 acres at the property, and it was from fence line to fence line. She went out to take a photograph of the rainbow, and as she did, a craft appeared under the rainbow. But what was interesting, when we looked at the time on the photograph, it was the same time on the clock in the bedroom when I was communicating with Tia in the craft. So but they include my wife now. But that to me is more confirmation of the telepathic communication. I was speaking with a friend of mine who's become a friend now, Karen, the other day, and she's been given the exact same downloads, scientific downloads that I've been given about the quantum unified field theory, which I knew nothing about. But then to meet someone else who's been given exactly the same information, word for word, you get confirmation all the time, and that makes you comfortable and confident in speaking out in relation to these modalities of contact, which I believe we can all develop. I'm no different from anybody else. Other than that, I've been educated to, I mean, you cannot fly a 747 jet without learning how to fly the jet. You can't just sit in the cockpit and fly it. So you have to learn the different stages. Well, it's the same with telepathic communication, all the other modalities that they use, out-of-body travel, creation, co-creation, healing, all using consciousness. So once we realize that, as I think I said before, we are evolving as a species, and we're evolving into a galactic species. We're already traveling in space, and we're already going to Mars with the rockets and things. We need to educate ourselves into the spiritual side of who we are as a species, and have an understanding of consciousness and the different levels of consciousness, from the 3rd dimension down here to the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, all the way up to the angelic realms. So once we learn that, then we will evolve as a species.
You talk about out-of-body experience, right? Then is that the same as like astral travel?
I think it's similar, but I think the out-of-body travel is I'm actually separating my conscious energy. Mm-hmm. I see the conscious energy, my spirituality, the spiritual side of who I am. can be separated from the physical. I believe when we remote view, we're using consciousness itself as the conduit, and the name itself describes it, remote viewing. And because conscious energy has duality and entanglement, that allows us to remote view. What I do is separate the conscious energy from the physical and travel out of the body. Now, did do that on one occasion. I was traveling out of body on the astral plane. A craft came alongside me, and Orton D were in the craft. They asked me to come onto the craft. They wanted to give me some information for somebody. I went onto the craft. Bear in mind, I'm traveling out of body. As I went through the skin of the craft, it was conscious. I could feel the conscious energy. When I entered, Orton D were there. They greeted me, and I saw them as pure conscious energy orbs, yellow, orange, slightly vibrating. And I asked them a question. I said, let me see if I understand this. I said, here we are, three different beings traveling outside of our physical body on the astral plane as pure conscious energy. And I see you as these orange orbs. I said, is that correct? They said, yes, that's correct. I said, well, how do you see me? They said, Kevin, we see you exactly the same, as a pure conscious energy orb. So like I say, we're the three beings traveling out of body, and that's one of the modalities that they use of communication. And I'm able to do that. They're able to do it, and I'm sure others do. So I think there's a slight difference between remote viewing and out-of-body travel. I'll give you a little quick story. I was traveling outside of my body a while ago now. I can't remember how long ago it was, but and I was coming back to the Earth, and I was flying between the moon and the Earth, and I materialized on a small craft which was being flown by two greys. They were transporting minerals from the Earth to the moon, and I materialized behind the two seats in the cockpit. They both looked round at me and said to one another telepathically, what's he doing here? So I'd really entered their realm, their reality, and I realized I shouldn't be there. So I apologized and I left. I went back home. I went into my physical body and woke up. As I woke up, there was a tall grey stood next to my bed, and he told me not to interfere. I wasn't to interfere. He was warning me. So clearly I'd upset them by infiltrating their reality accidentally, but I didn't do it. But then he left, and then a reptilian materialized in the bedroom. And I hadn't seen a reptilian up until that time. And I've heard of them. I know people do have contact with him. But he was ambivalent to who I was. He was ambivalent to the human race. He didn't like us. He thought we were inferior. He was there to see how a mere human could travel outside of the physical body, materialize on a small craft, and have telepathic communication with two greys. So he didn't stay long. That's my first encounter with the reptilian. But clearly, I've heard of other stories where people have had good and bad encounters with it. So, but if we are going to evolve as a species, then we need to learn all about this. Really. I think it's quite exciting times, Caia, in relation to our evolution.
You never be scared of looking at them, you know, like they look so different. Like you're talking about reptilians and then mantis beings, for example. Mantis beings, I've heard that they're very intelligent, and then not as you said, as a human being, you know, we have like a good people and bad people, for example. So mantis being itself, they have different characters, of course, but what I know is they're very intelligent. And one of the lady who encountered them, and she said they're very compassionate, and then they're very nice, you know, like sending her love, and feeling so comfortable just being with them. So but anyway, so those beings look completely different from us, right? And
yes,
you don't get feared, like scared?
Not now. No. When I first met Chica when I was 14, I was a bit perturbed by him because, like I say, it's just a huge mantis bean like we have down here. I have little mantis beans in my yard, and I always stop and talk to them, but they're only small, but they look exactly the same as Chica. And as you say, they're very intelligent race, very compassionate. And in fact, I cracked a joke with Chica. I asked him if he was an entomologist, and he wasn't happy with that at all. He looked down at me, So I was just trying to be funny, but yeah. So no, I'm not frightened of them. I've met many, and I think that it's like here on Earth. We have many different cultures. We're all slightly different. We're part of the human race, but we have different cultures from different areas of our globe. Well, really, it's just expanding that understanding of it. But to do that, we have to understand consciousness itself, and then really who we are as a species, and why do we already have these abilities. I've met many people now who can do healing, who have psychic abilities, who can travel outside of their physical body like I do, who have contact with their own ETs. Maybe not to the extent that I do, but there's a lot of contact going on, and a lot of people don't speak out about it for fear of ridicule, which has been the thing of the past now. Because there's so many experiences speaking out, they can ridicule me if they want, but I don't care. It's my life. These are my experiences. These are my interactions. And if you don't want to believe it, that's fine. If you think it's all BS, then that's fine. I'm not here to persuade anybody. I have a mission. I know my mission, and most experiences, some do know their missions and some don't. Mine is really threefold. I thought it was twofold, but I think it's threefold now. I know for certain that I'm here to help facilitate the reveal of the presence of our ET star families globally. I'm here to share my story, which I'm doing today with you, which I am doing now, writing and talking about it. And the third is an intermediary messenger from those here on Earth who wish to make contact with our star families and who have an understanding that we are not alone in the universe. Not only we are not alone, the universe is teeming with life and different species. And as I say, to grow and develop as a species and evolve, we need to educate ourselves. And that's what we are doing, I think.
And when you communicate with those beings, I've heard so many times like you're relaxing and then you're shifting kind of frequencies, then you can communicate with them as you are shifting to different realm, or what's happening there?
Yeah, what's happening there is okay, let's give an example of traveling on the astral plane. I'm obviously leaving my physical body, going to a higher vibrational frequency as pure conscious energy. So I'm traveling up to the that level, and Art and D are lowering their frequency and coming down to that level. So we're communicating at the same level as pure conscious energy and able to see that pure conscious energy as the orange, yellow orb. So, but I'm also able to communicate with the others as well. I'm able to communicate with deceased family members and friends. But again, because from my perspective, it's only their physical that has died. Their conscious energy is still alive and active. To me, it's simple, Caia, because I've done it all my life. But it's also simple because I've been educated throughout the years.
And I've seen that you're doing the channeling of Ra on the video. So why are you doing it? Are you feeling vibrations or what's happening physically?
Okay, I fell into channeling accidentally a number of years ago. I had some friends out of my home, Denise, Melanie, and Kathy, and we were doing a meditation. After we'd done the meditation, Melanie asked me, "Kevin, did you see anything? Did you feel anything?" And I said, "No, not really, no." And I said it except for there's a male stood next to me, but that's normal to me, so I'm not feeling anything untoward. She said, "Well, who is it?" I said, "I don't know." So Melanie said, "Well, will you ask him?" So I asked him, and it was Art. And then he spoke through me as a channel. That's how I fell into channeling. On the first occasion, I didn't know what was said, and I didn't understand what was happening, really. I do now. And but my my body temperature raises because their frequency, they call it dual conscious physical communication, where they're using their conscious energy into my physical, and that generates the heat. We've measured the air temperature immediately around me when I have channeled, and it's gone up as much as 10 degrees. And that shows that our physicals are not really compatible with the higher frequencies because it causes that heat. And but I've got used to it now. I still get the heat. I still don't always remember what's said. That's why we write it down. In fact, a friend of mine, well, Kathy Marden, she's written a book called Forbidden Knowledge, and some of the channels are in that book. I think there's 120 questions. So if anybody's interested in what our ET star families have said through me channeling, they need to buy Kathleen Marden's book. I've got a copy here actually. Forbidden Knowledge. It's an excellent read. So.
Interesting, because it was really natural process. You know, you were just standing up and then just tuning into that place, and then you started to speak, and then that was a message from Ra. And then I am conducting the QHHE sessions. I have quite a lot of clients, and then they're channeling kind of like their higher selves or some other beings, and then it's the same process. So everyone can have this ability actually, but we are not taught how to do it. But you are, yes, but you are kind of educated by those beings how to do it. So it's more like natural. It's easy for you, right?
And because I don't have any fear, I allowed it to happen. It to happen.
Yes.
And so yeah, I think there's another channel I did with Susan Schatzer on her TV show, and that's on my website if anybody's interested. But the one you mentioned, I think I don't know if I put that on my website, but it's out there on YouTube. I think if you Google September 29th, 2019, Miami conference, and you'll see if you watch that my body gets, I'm stood up doing that one, and my body gets extremely hot, and you can see me start sweating. But as I say, I've explained that's because of the higher frequencies. I find it fascinating that people are interested, Caia. I mean, that's just before it was all tin hat brigade and woo woo, and now people are realizing there's something to this. So
it's the right timing, you know, to talk about it and then share this information. And
yes,
as you specializes in consciousness, I just want to ask you, what is consciousness then?
Okay, I can tell you how they explained it to me, if I can remember it. I had a download. I was just sat by my pool. I was given this download, and when I was given the download, I asked them to show me a craft, the confirmation that they'd given me the download. A craft appeared immediately. I went in to get my wife. I said, come outside, there's a craft appeared. She came outside. The craft was still there. A second one appeared. Third, 4, 5, 6, 7 in total appeared, flew silently over our heads, changed direction about 80 degrees, and then disappeared sequentially as they had arrived. And within that download was the information about consciousness itself. Conscious energy is in all matter. It exists at the quantum level as light frequencies. Between the spaces of the atomic levels, those light frequencies are there. And that's why we can understand a plant, a tree being conscious, but we don't understand that a rock is conscious. But a rock is matter, and within that matter are those light frequencies. So really, in answer to your question, conscious energy are light frequencies. All life has light frequencies. We're all connected, and this is why I think now we are growing collectively through consciousness itself, and we are the creators of our own reality. We are the co-creators of our own reality, and I think now that we can co-create this new future for humanity, we can co-create a society that we desire for our children, for our future generations. This new society will include our extended ET star families. we, the citizens of Earth, to educate ourselves, learn from one another, listen to podcasts and things. And if you've got questions from people like me, send me an email. You know, my email's kevinjamesbriggs@gmail.com. Send me an email. I'll answer your questions if I can.
Fantastic. That was my last question I was going to ask.
And I do have a website. I have uploaded some interviews on there. Kevin J, just the initial J, kevinjbriggs.com.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much. That was very interesting information. And I'd like you to, maybe next time, the channeling the Ra or some energies, and then maybe we can show the people how you do it and then what's the message is about. But anyway, thank you so much for today, for your time. And
okay.
Yes.
Thank you again for inviting me. As I say, Caia, without people like yourself, I can't get the message out there. So the work that you're doing is very important. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much.